What's up, guys? It's David here from Unqualified Critics with another update on home arcades. John D from Arcade One Up sat down with the One Up Weekly show yesterday, as of this recording, October 18th, and he dropped a lot of news. Whenever John D goes live with anybody, it's always a big deal because whether it's legitimate or not, he seems to sometimes speak outside of the bounds of sort of the official PR framework. So I don't know if that's a strategy or if it isn't, but it almost doesn't matter. We get a lot of information, and I wanted to condense that information for you, which I'm going to do in this video. If you want to watch the full interview, I'd recommend you check it out. It is a very cool interview, and I will put a link below through the One Up Weekly, which is Console Kits and Retro Ralph. So I'm not going to show you any footage from that since it's their footage, and I want to respect that. But I'm going to talk to you about all the things that I thought were newsworthy coming out of that interview. So first off, the Polaroid photo booth that I reported on previously, that is a real Arcade One Up product. I wondered if that was maybe a mistake in the listing on GameStop, but no, it is legit. It's $3.99. The info we saw on the GameStop listing seems to be real, although that hasn't all been confirmed. It will print photos. It'll allow for uploading photos to, I don't know what, I guess Polaroid's cloud services probably, and there will be filters. I wasn't a fan of the design. It didn't scream retro gaming to me, but I do like the idea of branching out into the home gaming space and getting into kind of the kitschy stuff that people would have in a game room or in an arcade. But we all know what we really want along those lines, and that's a claw machine. No word on that yet. We're going to see a lot of Konami titles coming in 2021, which is exciting. There will be a Costco version of Miss Pac-Man coming, which shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, but there it is. The strategy for the original Gen 1 cabinets, if you guys have been following Arcade One Up for a while, you probably remember Pac-Man, Galaga, Street Fighter, and a couple other titles. Those were the Wave 1 Arcade One Ups. The hardware quality was not very good. They are planning to revisit these. We're going to see variations of these previously released cabinets. It sounds like these might be more of a compilation type cabinet with maybe as many as 12 titles per cabinet instead of 3 or 4. But that these are going to be basic, no frills cabinets, no lit marquee, no riser, and that those upgrades will be available from arcade1up.com. Speaking of those upgrades, I will believe it when I see it because they've been talking about that for a long time. But John D did shed some light on why we're not getting the light up marquees and other products. There were licensing constraints. Apparently they didn't have licensing to include branding on all of these accessories. It's weird how that works. I have a hard time wrapping my head around the world of licensing. You'd think if a company wants to make money from its brand and they're willing to work with a company in a certain segment like Arcade One Up, you'd think it wouldn't matter if the branding was on a marquee or on a cabinet, but apparently it does matter. But John says he has all that tied up now and that we are going to start to see that stuff come out over the next few months and that this will be a big part of the Gen 1 revisiting strategy. He did restate many times we're not going to see true multicades, but that there'll be more 12-in-1s going forward, including, most notably, a Tempest cabinet, which I've reported on before, with arcade-accurate side panels. I kind of think we might see that in time for Holiday 2020, but there was no mention of that. And speaking of older titles, Street Fighter Live is coming in 2021. That is an online-enabled for online play Street Fighter cabinet, but it's coming in a different form factor, which I take that to mean cocktail cabinet, but I don't know that for sure. Many of you have been asking about the individual components of Arcade One Ups, things like the PCBs, control panels, all that, much of which is sold out on arcade1up.com, but that is being restocked and going to be fully restocked by the end of the year, according to John. All right, Golden Axe. I just did a review on Golden Axe, and if you haven't watched it, go watch it. That is one of the best Arcade One Up cabinets yet. You really could make an argument that it is the best. I would argue it's just maybe one notch below from the best, but man, it is a really good cabinet. However, in my review, I told you this was a fantastic deal at $3.99. That was true. The price will now be $4.99. It's coming back in early 2021. It won't be on Arcade One Up's website, apparently. It'll be in retailers. Currently, you can get this at Canada if you're in Canada at the Brick. So if you're Canadian, you're actually, for once, you're in luck when it comes to an Arcade One Up cabinet. If you're anywhere else, you're going to have to wait a while for this, and you're going to have to pay a little more money. Bottom line, is it worth $500? Yeah, I would say it is, but at $400, it was just a knock-dead deal, so I really wish it was still $400 for you guys who haven't picked it up yet, but that's just not the reality. Now, here's the thing, though. Retailers are the reason this was an Arcade One Up exclusive and why we're waiting until next year to get it at retail. John talked at length about retail buyers not picking up games that maybe they aren't familiar with. Man, retail buyers suck. And I think a lot of the complaints people have about Arcade One Up is because actually the people doing purchasing for Walmarts aren't very good at this niche. They're not specifically knowledgeable maybe about arcade or different arcade titles, and that really limits the kind of titles that can get released in stores, which is super lame. And John talked a lot about using arcade1up.com as a platform for market testing and proving that out in the future to confirm to people that there is a market for a particular title and then get it picked up by retail. My hope is eventually companies like Arcade One Up have enough clout that they can kind of educate the stores on what they should be selling and what is worth selling, but clearly we're not there yet, and these retailers are holding all the strings. All right, now will we get another light gun cabinet beyond Buck Hunter? Well, John said let's see how Buck Hunter does first, which is fair. Buck Hunter's not even out yet, and we're already kind of looking past it. But I know so many of you want a quote-unquote a real arcade shooter. I like Buck Hunter, and I haven't played it a ton, but I've definitely played my share of it in bars and such. And I am excited for this cabinet, but I'm with you guys. I want to see games like House of the Dead. I want to see games like Area 51, which, by the way, John was asked specifically by, I think, Retro Ralph, about Area 51, and John was very, very non-committal. Sometimes he'll kind of wink and nod when something's being planned. Doesn't sound like that's the case for Area 51, unfortunately. However, on Buck Hunter, there is some news. The games are going to play at 60 frames per second. He didn't specifically say every single title, but I think they all run on the same engine. So if they've optimized one game for 60 FPS, I would assume they're all optimized. Apparently in the arcade originally they were 30 frames per second, which I never noticed when I was playing. There's not a lot of super fast motion on screen, so I don't know how much different it would matter, but more frames per second is always better when it comes to gaming. They've improved the graphics a little bit too, so I think we can expect it to look really good. When asked which games he would do if Buck Hunter does well, and I bet it will do well, he specifically called out House of the Dead, Time Crisis, and Terminator. Now, I know Terminator is not technically like a game, but you all know what we mean. It's a shooting cabinet, and I'm sure it could be recreated with light gun technology, or they could use more of that traditional mechanical two-axis movement that the original cabinet used. I just would assume they'd stick with Sinden and keep things mechanically very simple. However, Time Crisis was the first title John threw out there. To me, that's surprising. The guns, I believe, had recoil. I'm pretty sure. I know that later Time Crisis did. I think Time Crisis 1 had recoil, but you guys can tell me in the comments. It also had pedals. So pedal-based shooter games are on the table, which is pretty cool. Next up, bouncing around a little bit, I know, but next up on Miss Pac-Man, we are going to get that dip switch settings patch in 2 to 3 weeks. When I reported on this before, the first time it was firmware updated, I was a little skeptical. They've proven now that they can deliver firmware updates. I fully believe them that in a few weeks we're going to see it on Miss Pac-Man, and you never know, maybe it takes a little bit longer with testing or whatnot, but I'm excited to see that. What I want to know, and has not been asked yet, is will the Miss Pac-Man cocktail cabinet also be updated with dip switch settings? I have that cocktail cabinet review coming soon, and I really, really want to know, because that's a good cabinet and it deserves to be updated. All right, next up, Infinity Game Table. I know a lot of you aren't that interested in it, but there is an Arcade One Up tile, as Justin pointed out in the interview, and John explained it could be used to play real conventional video games on that Infinity Games table. It's not necessarily just board games. Nothing specific there, and it almost sounded like those would be updates that we might get down the road. They might not be there on day one, but we'll see. All right, next up, racing cabinets. I think it's not a big secret right now that Outrun is the first cabinet to come. If we were to have a racing title that comes out this year, John says it will be the sit-down format first, and then a stand-up model later, and it'll probably be direct from arcade1up.com. So the retailers are going to be pushing the sit-down cabinets. Some of you want the stand-up cabinets because you don't have room for a sit-down cabinet. I understand that. Depending on the size of this, I may or may not have room for it and a pinball too, so I've got to kind of consider what I do. Do I get this Outrun cabinet, or do I wait a little while until we get other future racing games? I'm torn because I like Outrun, but I like games like Daytona USA more, but those are a ways out. The other option, though, is to buy it and sell it later and then get the new one. I don't know. It's going to be tough to decide. But there was news on that Outrun cabinet. It'll have 4 games included, not 5. 5 was the original number they gave us when they were talking about Outrun a while back. And they haven't specifically said Outrun, but we all kind of know with a wink and a nod that's what we're talking about. All right, moving on to pinball. Why was Wi-Fi removed from pinball? Well, it was for cost considerations, which was pretty much what I expected. But the news was this. If they do a Wave 2 Pinball. If Pinball does well, they're going to do a Gen 2. And that second generation probably will have Wi-Fi and probably will have a Pinball store where you can download more Zen titles. If that is the case, John did say very clearly there will be an upgrade kit available to Gen 1 table owners so we can get into a Pinball store. That is fantastic news because these are kind of pricey at $550, and I don't think we want that version just completely wiped clean with a new better version next year. And to that point, there won't be different variants of the 3 pinball tables that are coming initially. That is the Attack from Mars, the Star Wars, and the Marvel. That's just going to be what version you see is the version you get. There aren't going to be different artwork variants. We do know now that there will be 3 solenoids for haptic feedback, one on the left, one on the right, and one in the center. By left and right, I'm pretty sure that's going to mean lower down on the cabinet for the bumpers. Because you guys know when the pinball hits the bumpers, you feel that, the bumper snaps. Well, this is just a video pinball, so it's a simulation, but that's where a solenoid is really going to come into play. And then there's a center one for just general haptics. Also, the solenoids will be replaceable. They will support users swapping out the solenoids, which is great news because those do die over time. The top on the pinball is confirmed to be plexiglass, not glass. I think that was confirmed previously, but I'd never heard it from a primary source. So we see that here. They say it'll be a good plexiglass, hard to scratch, but you know, look, getting the real glass top as you get with the At Games Legends pinball, that is a differentiator, and it's up to you if that matters to you. The Star Wars pinball art has been changed and, according to John, improved, although of course that's subjective, since the original was shown at CES, but it does still include the Disney trilogy, which I was really disappointed to hear. Star Wars Marvel and Attack from Mars pinball will start shipping from China beginning at the end of October. That's kind of an awkward sentence, but basically in a couple weeks from the time of this video recording, you're going to start to see those roll out, and then through November. But remember, that is just coming in from China. It can take 3 weeks or more to get from China to port at Los Angeles in the United States, and then from there it can take a week to distribute out through the country. So we are ways out. It is not confirmed if it'll be here before Christmas, but if we miss Christmas, it will only be missed by a few days. We are getting Arcade 1-Up pinball this season, and I know there's been a ton of back and forth on that, but I'm excited to hear that. Attack from Mars also will be direct to customer, no retailer availability, at least initially. Let me tell you guys, I said it earlier, these retailers suck. The Attack from Mars is the one that, if I had to guess, judged by the comments, at least among all of you, that's the one people want the most. Yeah, Star Wars will have a big market, and yeah, Marvel will have a big market. But I think a lot of people want to simulate a real pinball table, not just play a fully simulated table like with the Star Wars variants that we're going to get there. I think retailers are dramatically underestimating the demand for Attack from Mars. It's also an absolutely beautiful cabinet, and I think if I have to pick one, that's the one I would prefer to get. And of all the places to order these pinballs, John is saying actually GameStop is going to get their units first. So if you got to have this on day one, go to GameStop. All right, another question. I'm so glad this was asked by Ralph or somebody in the chat. I'm not sure. But why doesn't Code Mystics do all of your cabinets? I've wondered that too. The answer was because they don't have the capacity. They're working with Code Mystics on an ongoing basis to work on more and more cabinets. They love working with Code Mystics, but the Code Mystics, I guess, is limited in team capacity, and they can only take on so many titles at a time. So we're going to continue to see Code Mystics trickle out, but I think word is out now, and people are going to be looking extra hard at buying all the Code Mystics cabinets. I know I will be going forward. There are no plans right now on a 19-inch monitor, but John went back and forth on this. So he talked about playing Buckhunter on a 17-inch, said there's no issues, but that there will be stuff where we have to have a bigger monitor, like games with pedals, shooting games with pedals. So getting back to Time Crisis from earlier. So he says no 19-inch monitor, but then he talks about, well, there might be a 19-inch monitor, and actually we're looking at 19 or even 20 to support mix and match vertical and horizontal screens, and that you'd see those bigger monitors in the $500 plus cabinets that maybe are coming down the road and aren't out yet. So they're really all over the place on monitor size, but it is a possibility. I would like to see a 19 or 20 inch monitor in the cocktail cabinet. Everyone's worried about the shooting cab, but I think of all their products that they make, the one that would look the best, benefit the most from a larger monitor is that sit-down cocktail cab, but that wasn't brought up in this interview. All right, they're looking into full USB ports for easier patching, but that it's a cost issue, and that long-term they still plan to migrate all firmware updates or patching to a Wi-Fi signal. So they are going to be offering Wi-Fi in cabinets at some point, but that has been delayed. Also, there was a question I thought was super interesting. What is Arcade One Up going to be doing in 2 years? Well, John sees him as the number one brand in retro home electronics, going out beyond arcades, different SKUs, different age groups, but potentially, and this is the big news, potentially full size arcades and even commercial quality arcades. Guys, I've been doing videos lately on some of the commercial stuff like ice games, and I've got another video that's going to be coming from another big company in commercial full size arcades. I'm going to have an interview with one of their team members. You're going to see a merging over the next few years between commercial arcades and home arcades. The lines are going to get blurred because that market is changing so fast because of the shutdown. Wait and see. All right, next up, getting back to news from this video, Simpsons 2021, will we see it? John reacted in a cheeky way to that one. It made me think that we are going to see Simpsons 2021 next year, which obviously that will be a huge seller. And with Disney now owning Simpsons, I'm sure they're eager to license that out. We're going to see horizontal screen countercades in 2021. I don't really care about that. I'm not into the countercades, but in case you guys are, Cruising USA and Daytona are games that they're looking at, but there's no concrete update on them. Those are the big time racing games that are really going to move some units. Area 51, when asked about that, John demurred a little bit. There are other light gun games we want to do before Area 51. Yeah, I agree. There are a lot of important light gun games, but I would put Area 51 in that top 5 for sure, and I hope we do see it soon. Okay, next up, Golden Tee and Silver Strike Bowling. That cabinet was briefly shown at CES 2020 and then pulled off the floor the next day. So what is going on? Well, they are doing a reiteration of Golden Tee, and it will have a bowling game, but it won't be Silver Strike. Silver Strike is probably too difficult to emulate with their existing hardware, and so they've probably scaled it back and are using a simpler bowling game. But I still think that's good news as long as it's a good bowling game, and I'm not familiar with all of those games that are out there, so I don't know what games it would be. But combining bowling and Golden Tee into one cabinet is a great idea, and he says they hope to also have online leaderboards. Again, great idea. If they come out with that, I still hope they do an upgrade kit, but if they don't, at this point, I probably will sell my existing Golden Tee and pick up the new one so I can get bowling and get those online leaderboards going. And the last thing, I was so disappointed by this. They're talking about Tapper, and they think they'll do that and release Tapper, the arcade game, but not as its own cabinet, but as a compilation. That is super lame. Tapper is a great looking cabinet. It's got those unique joysticks. It should just be its own game. But that's just one man's opinion. I want to know in the comments what you guys think. I know this is a long video. There was a lot to get to. If you want to see the full interview, click that link below to go to One Up Weekly and check that out. And anyway, thanks for watching. Smash that like button if you enjoyed my summary, and I'll talk to you later. Hey, consider hitting that join button to support the channel, and thanks so much for watching.